So I'm Matt Whitehead, I'm the Director of Fundraising Communications at Renewable World. Welcome to our breakfast briefing on our wash and solar water lifting work in Nepal and our Big Give Christmas campaign and our Water for Life appeal within that. We've got a really great couple of presentations for you to tell you a lot more about Renewable World's work in Nepal and specifically our solar water lifting work. We'll also touch a little bit on, of course, on the Big Give campaign, which is coming up well in just a few weeks' time ahead of Christmas this year. And there'll be a chance towards the end of the session for you to raise any questions that and any thoughts that the presentations that you see this morning might have prompted for you. When we're doing that, it would be great actually if you can use the reactions button, which you should have along the top, for most of you anyway, should be along the top of your Teams window. And in there, you'll be able to raise your hand and I'll keep an eye on those reactions and try and log those of you that want to make a comment or ask a question. You can also type your questions into the chat bar. So the chat function should be along the top of your Teams window as well and will appear on the right hand side when you're typing into it. So that's most of the housekeeping from me, you'll be glad to hear. We have got a couple of speakers with us. We're lucky to be joined by Helen Russell, who is our Grants and Impacts Manager here at Renewable World in the UK, and Thakur Thapa, who is our Country Director for our programme in Nepal. Helen, if you wouldn't mind now, actually, so Helen's going to share her screen, and Helen, if you could get the presentation up on screen for everyone, that would be wonderful. Brilliant, thank you so much. So, Helen, if we can move on to the agenda slide, onto the second slide, that'd be fantastic. So as I said, we're going to have a real deep dive into our solar water lifting work in Nepal. Thakur is going to set the scene for us, and then Thakur and Helen together will tell you a lot more about how it works and the future of the programming. And we will also have a brief preview of our Water for Life appeal for the Big Give Christmas 2022 campaign. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over, I think, initially to Thakur, who's going to begin the presentation.
Hi everyone, good morning from Kathmandu. I hope you can hear me. Really appreciate you all for coming here today. And let me start with a brief background to Nepal. Nepal is rich in culture and wildlife diversity. Has mighty mountains, beautiful valleys, forests, lakes, snow-fed rivers and waterfalls. As you can see, some of those highlights in the picture below, which I took just a week ago. and Nepal's current population is close to 30 million. Next slide, Helen, please. And talking broadly about Nepal's water and sanitation situation, Nepal is among the poorest country globally and is still recovering from the impacts of its devastating 2015 earthquakes. And Nepal is highly vulnerable to climate instability, struggling with water scarcity in some areas and increased flooding in others. Nepal's constitution recognizes access to safe water and sanitation as a right at only 27% of the overall population, and 13% of rural population have access to a safely managed water source, and 38% of the population do not have access to basic sanitation facilities. And especially people living in the hills and mountains, they have a less adaptive capacity, they are economically poor, and many communities cannot be reached through gravity-fed water systems. So water scarcity means they are struggling to provide enough crops, making them food insecure and unable to pay for water services. In addition, hill communities lack access to markets due to difficulty in transportation. So Helen has already moved to another slide. So I would like to talk about this Nepal's, water and sanitation situation, which has triggered additional burden, on women. In one of the recent studies conducted in 2022 in the adjoining districts of Kathmandu, more than a third of women in Nepal carry water from source to home to satisfy their family's daily needs. There is some background noise. I don't know what is that. Uh, I hope it's not too disturbing. Yeah.
Yeah, could we?
People haven't muted.
Yes, could we ask everyone participating on the call if you could just mute your microphones whilst we're presenting? That would be great, and that should mitigate the issue there. There we go. Yeah. I think we have done it. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks. Yeah, I was referring to this recent case study, from this adjoining districts of Kathmandu, and from this study, it was found that this difficulty in water situation is impacting on the health of women. And in the study conducted, 2/3 of women reported back pain. 1/3 of women reported pain in the knees. About 11% reported cases of uterine prolapse, and about 9% reported at least one spontaneous abortion. And also, based on my several field visits, even my own village situation, in many rural villages, women usually spend 2 to 3 hours every day to collect water, and some of the women wake up at 3 a.m. to collect water to reach ahead of the queue. Next slide, please. So let me also touch upon this poverty and migration situation in Nepal. 2021 Nepal census shows that 23% of the population live on less than $1.25 a day. Karnali province is the poorest province in Nepal, where 29% of people live under absolute poverty, and 52% of the people are multidimensionally poor. And this is where most of the renewable worlds projects are active in Nepal. And due to limited livelihood and employment opportunities in the country, a total of 2.2 million Nepalese, which is about 7% of the total population, and 20%, it also represents 20% of the youth population, and 82% of those migrants are male. So they migrate to Malaysia, India, Gulf, and other countries in search of jobs, leaving behind men and children who are struggling to thrive. Next slide, please. So as you can see on the screen, now I would like to move on to the introduction to SolarMooS promoted by Renewable World in Nepal. It's a proven solar-powered water lifting technology known as SolarMooS, which is solar water lifting system for multiple use. It is a solution that aims to tackle water and livelihood issues. And solar power is used to lift water to communities sitting above their water source, which is often a perennial spring or a stream. You can see on the screen, the water is actually moving there from the source to the community, which is above the water source. And water is then distributed using gravity to tap stands outside each house, providing each household with water for domestic and agricultural purposes. And with good maintenance, the systems will last 20 years or more. We also train and link communities to agriculture service providers and traders, to sell produce, which will result in increased household income. Next slide, please. So what's the financing model developed by Renewable World for SolarMooS, or how is it financed? We use a proven mixed funding model to finance the cost of the SolarMooS. We see our role as a catalyst, unlocking government funds for innovative technologies, providing technical support to help build government capacity, and showcasing the results to encourage governments to replicate proven approaches. So Project Grant plays a critical role in unlocking in-country grants and contributions to support the installation. We stimulate water user communities to leverage funding from government sources. We also inspire communities for cash and in-kind contributions. This approach can be time-taking, but we are confident that it is the correct approach. Contributions by local stakeholder means they are committed to the success and sustainability of the project. And we don't replace, but support the government to fulfill their duties, with access to water and energy being basic rights. Next slide, please. So advantages of solar mousse and its sustainability. One of the major advantages of solar pump is that its energy comes straight from the sun, lowering operating cost. The solar pumping system does not emit greenhouse gases. And considering the upfront cost and operation and maintenance cost, diesel pumps are about 2 to 4 times higher than solar pump over the life cycle of solar water pumping. It is a flexible device which can be used in remote region of the country where grid connection is inaccessible. And the geographical belt of Nepal is in a very good solar region, having about 4 to 5 peak sunshine hours on an average for approximately 300 days in a year. And in all our solar mousse projects, as a matter of priority, we provide technical support for the protection and conservation of the water source from where water is being lifted to the community. And this is critical for the long-term sustainability of the project, as well as the continued well-being of the communities. So now I would like to pass on to Helen, who will take you to our solar water lifting journey in Nepal. Please, Helen.
Great, thank you so much, Thakur. So yes, I'll now walk through Renewable World Solar Lifting Journey in Nepal, or Solar Mousse as it is also known. So we've been delivering solar water pumping systems in Nepal for 10 years now, and our journey can be divided up into 3 sort of clear phases. And through this time, we've been testing, evaluating, refining our approach, getting to where we are today. So we started in 2012 with our pilot project and have since seen the program scale up, delivering over 35 solar mousse systems to date, with a further 15 underway as we speak. And we're now focusing our attention on supporting communities to get the most out of their new water source by linking communities with agricultural training and other value addition activities, as well as integrating hygiene and sanitation training. As Thakur's already shared, our solar lifting program is quite far-reaching across Nepal. As you can see from this map, our program is primarily concentrated in the central and western regions of the country, but with a couple of early pilot projects further to the east. Those are the couple of blue pins you can see. In our current phase of the program, we focus our work even more in a more targeted manner, with the majority of the projects being in Karnali province, which, as Thakur's already mentioned, is the poorest province in Nepal. And that lies roughly in the area where you can see the cluster of orange and green pins sort of towards the centre. So what does our program look like to date? We've installed 35 solar mousse systems across 11 districts, reaching over 11,000 people. And with this, we've also brought water access to 31 schools, clinics, and other community institutions. And in total, we've installed 1,400 community and household tap stands. And as I've already mentioned, through our ongoing portfolio, which is due to close next year, we'll be installing a further 15 solar mousse systems. So moving on, I'll go into a little more detail about each of the phases of our program so we can kind of understand how that journey has taken place. As I mentioned, the solar mousse journey started in 2012 with our pilot project. And at this early point in time, 10 years ago, Renewable World was just establishing our niche as a renewable energy expert in Nepal. And our focus during this phase was on technical design, testing the systems within the Nepal context, and working with local suppliers to source the right components. At the same time, we were developing our community-centered model to ensure that communities were really at the heart of the projects that we were delivering. The systems back then were a lot smaller than those that we deliver today. They were serving communities between 20 to 50 families only, and they pumped a fairly modest average of around 18,000 litres a day. And we were, in those early days, installing shared community tap stands. So one tap stand serving between 5 to 10 households. At this point in time as well, the project was fully grant funded. But by 2012, we were moving into phase 2 of the programme. We were really scaling up our work. We were delivered 17 systems across 17 communities in 8 districts in Nepal. And at this point, we had a much clearer understanding of how the technology worked best and at what cost it could be delivered. So our 2 main focus areas under this phase was first to move away from the fully grant funded model, as Thakur's already explained in a lot of detail, looking to secure government buy-in and unlock government funds to support the installation of the systems. And second, we introduced linking agricultural training with water access, with a specific objective of supporting communities to make the most of their new water source, to financially benefit their families, and at the same time make the systems more sustainable, as families would have the income available to then fund any repair and maintenance of the systems. A couple of distinguishing factors between this and the first phase of the programme were that the communities we were working with were much larger, ranging between 80 to 200 households. And this meant that the systems needed to be a lot bigger too, pumping on average about 40,000 litres a day, but our biggest system to date pumps about 80,000 litres. This proved to be quite a technical challenge at times, but something our team really enjoyed tackling. We've also supported the government campaign of One House, One Tap, which moved away from shared community house tap stands to each household having their own tap stand outside their home. As you can imagine, this was something that was really quite appealing. Everyone just had their own water source suddenly arrive outside their homes. And moving beyond our own programme, Renewable World also started to share our expertise with other partners and worked on a number of projects through consortium partnerships and as technical consultants, bringing our expertise in solar moose to other organisations. So now in phase 3 of the programme, with the technology design largely matured and with strong technical partners in place and government support in place, we're turning our attention to really strengthening the complementary value-adding activities. This comes in a couple of forms. So enhanced agricultural training. So agricultural training is something we were delivering through phase 2, but with more in-house expertise at Renewable World, we've now been able to strengthen and really tailor those activities we're delivering. We're also introducing in some projects renewable energy powered agro-processing to support farmers to add value to their produce. And we're supporting farmers to be linked to the market so that they actually have somewhere to sell their crops. And finally, having made assumptions in the past about the link between improved access to water and improved health and sanitation, we now integrate sanitation and hygiene training into our programmes. So I'll just go into a little more detail on each of those next. So why agricultural training? So as Thakur's already mentioned, because of the lack of water access, most of the communities we work with have very limited agricultural growing capacity. They tend to stick to traditional crops such as winter wheat and summer rice. And they rarely have the opportunity to grow other commercial crops. This obviously limits their earning power. It's already been said, a lot of families have at least one family member, usually a husband or son, who migrate abroad to the Middle East or India to work. They send back money on which the families survive. And it's almost always the women, young children and elderly who are left behind. And this tears families apart and separates families. However, with improved water access, thanks to the solar pumping systems, this has real potential to change. Climate smart agriculture uses techniques such as drip irrigation systems and polytunnels to maximize product yields, but with minimal water use. And we now work through lead farmers in each community who form farmer groups and become the conduit for information and training into a community. We support farmers to grow high value crops such as vegetables. And we have seen families who previously grew nothing at all, now with flourishing plots growing vegetables throughout the year, like these two pictures you can see on the screen. This not only impacts what they're eating as a family, how much they're spending on food, but also for those who decide to sell their vegetables at the local market, we've seen a significant increase in household incomes. And as I've already mentioned, in our current portfolio projects, we're taking things a step further, supporting to add value through renewable energy powered agro-processing systems such as solar dryers, cold storage units and solar milling systems. So for example, in one project, we're supporting ginger producing farmers to dry their product, making it longer lasting and easier to transport. And at the same time, we're looking to connect the farmers with local collection centres and cooperatives, linking those farmers to market so that they have a better opportunity to sell their produce. So just a couple of little stories I wanted to share with you. This is Devistara Gurung, who's from one of the completed phase 3 communities. And not only is she the lead farmer in a farmer group made up of 40 people, 39 of whom are women, but she's also been putting her agricultural training into practice. At the point at which we did the survey, she'd been growing vegetables for a couple of seasons, and she had been focusing on growing high value vegetables in her kitchen garden using drip irrigation and plastic tunnels, not something she'd ever done before. And she was able to share with us that she could earn in one season somewhere between £740 to £1,100 just from the vegetables that she was growing. This increase in income has allowed her to expand her family assets, increase in livestock, and bring in a whole new income stream to her family. So what she's earning is at the higher end of the scale from what some of the families are earning, but her story really is amazing and a testament to what's possible. And then another little story I wanted to share with you was this really wonderful one. It's through a conversation with the mayor of Panchpuri municipality, one of the areas in which the phase 3 program has been delivered. He told us that one morning a man from Jabden Baghdadi, one of the project communities, showed up at his doorstep asking to arrange a vehicle to carry his vegetables to the nearby market. Jabden Baghdadi had been suffering with severe water scarcity for as long as the mayor could remember, so he never imagined that anyone there would be farming commercially. At first, the mayor thought it would only be a couple of kilos of tomatoes that the man wanted to transport, so he suggested that the farmer just take them himself using a traditional doka woven basket. But then he saw just how much produce there was. The farmer had grown vegetables in his 250 square metre plot, and the produce filled an entire pickup truck. The mayor was so impressed with what he saw that he quickly arranged a vehicle and helped get the man's produce to market. So what does this training achieve? What results have we seen? From our third phase evaluation that we've conducted last year, we've seen some results that we can share. So training in climate smart agriculture allows families to grow crops all year round. They're not just reliant on when the rains come. Across the community surveyed, the number of families growing crops in kitchen gardens increased by 72%. And there'd been a 23% increase in families selling crops at market. And for those families selling crops, we saw an income growth from just £48 a year in agricultural sales to an average of £620 a year. That's a 12-fold increase. But as we've already shown with a couple of the case studies, for some, the increase was a lot higher. And then finally, our current programme is also building in sanitation hygiene training as an integral part of the programme, rather than taking the link between access to water and improved hygiene just as a given. So this includes campaigns on safe water management, general hygiene practices and sanitation management within communities. And we're taking things a step further now by working directly with schools in some projects, focusing on the link between school attendance and toilet and sanitation facilities and water access. So how has water and sanitation training had an impact? Water access translates into hours saved each day by women who have to collect water, and it also means a reduction in conflict over water within communities. 100% of people interviewed reported that they'd saved time thanks to the water access, and 97% of people told us that their stress levels were reduced by the elimination of this water collecting as a daily chore. Perception of water sufficiency for toilets and sanitation purposes rose from 27% to 92%, and we've seen a significant decrease in the occurrence of waterborne diseases such as diarrhea, cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. So now I'd like to pass back to Thakur, who I believe has a couple of case studies, and then we'll talk you through our kind of current program and where we're headed next. So back to you, Thakur.
Yeah. Thanks, Helen. Before sharing our future plans and approach, for Solar Moose, let me share a case story of Ranga Bogati, as a user of Solar Moose, whom I met during one of my field visits. Ranga Bogati is now 30 years old. She lives in Panchapuri municipality of Surkhet district with her husband and 3 children. She begins her story, like 2 years ago. Life was way more difficult as she had to walk downhill through a treacherous path and carry water uphill for drinking and domestic purposes. She spent 2 to 3 hours every day to collect water and often left the house in the dark early morning to be ahead of the queue. Now with a cheerful face, she says life had changed after the installation of Solar Moose. With water at her doorsteps and trainings that she received, she has started to grow vegetables and increased number of goats from 3 to 20. And she sells 20 goats yearly and earn about 100,000 Nepalese rupees, which she uses for her family living and children's education. Initially, she had taken loan from the local community fund, to increase the number of goats, and now she has already cleared the loan. There has been an improvement in the hygiene behavior as well. Before she used to bath, once a month or so. Now she cleans and washes, hands properly and of course more frequently. And the project team has now left from her village. Initially, she mentioned that she very much hesitated to speak in the public, but as she was encouraged to speak in community meetings by the project team, that boosted her confidence, and now she can speak confidently in the community meetings. Yeah, next slide, Helen, please. Yeah, thank you. Let me briefly mention about our future Solar Moose plans and approach for Nepal. We would like to continue to promote Solar Moose and climate smart agriculture in Nepal. However, we will gradually change our approach and move towards market system approach, strengthening the local market system. This will mean developing links between farmers, financial institutions, input providers, value addition actors, and traders. And we have started conducting these market assessments, which has provided us a very good insight into how market systems operate, who are the market actors, how do they relate with each other, which of the market systems hold the greatest potentials for poor women and men, what are the barriers and root causes why poor people do not benefit from participating in these markets, what may be the incentives for private sector, etc. Yeah. So this is actually an ongoing research and analysis effort that we will undertake. And we will also facilitate dialogue with producers, consumers, traders, and other actors, trying to establish collaboration between relevant actors from private, public, and civil society actors who may not have collaborated before. And we will continue to promote these climate smart agriculture technologies, which Helen was mentioning, such as use of organic compost, drought resistant heritage seeds, polytunnel and drip irrigation, integrated pest management and post-harvest management techniques. So going forwards, such trainings will be delivered by the seed supplier or technology supplier rather than by the project staff. So this approach is designed to help build the existing system, which is more sustainable approach with opportunities for replication and scale up beyond the time frame of the project. And we already have a very strong collaboration with local governments at the planning and implementation stage. We will further ramp up our government engagement for evidence-based policy advocacy. And we will also further strengthen our research and development partnerships. So at the end, I would like to say that we are really proud to say we work for a renewable world, and we would like to continue to help create a sustainable and fairer world. So may I please now pass on to Matt for a short video and the final few slides maybe.
Wonderful. Thanks, Taka. Thank you, Helen. That was brilliant. And yeah, as Taka says, we'd just like now to play you a short video which tells you that little bit more about the Water for Life appeal and our solar moose systems. So Helen, if you're able to play the video, that'd be fantastic.
पानी देख्न पाइयो अब पानी नदेखेको मान्छे त्यही दिन त एकदमै स्वर्ग गयो जस्तो लाग्यो सर खुसी लागेको थियो अहिले त सबैमा पुगेछ नि सरसफाई भन्यो भने पनि पानी भएर अलि सुखै छ भनौं तरकारी पनि लगाइराखौं नि त अहिले
Wonderful. Thank you, Helen. So yes, please help us to reach more people. And so I want to tell you a little bit more about our Water for Life appeal. First off, I guess, what's the Big Give's Christmas Challenge? Well, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the Big Give, their Christmas Challenge is the UK's biggest online match funding campaign. So that means for 7 days, there's a 7-day window upcoming. Big Give offers individual supporters of the participating charities, of which obviously we are one, the opportunity to have their donations under that appeal doubled by the Big Give. The match funding comes from, well, a variety of sources, and for Renewable World, we have already secured a pot of match funding totaling 30,000 from the Reed Foundation and from an individual supporter. It's that match funding pot that enables your and others' future donations to the Big Give campaign made during that 7-day challenge week window to be doubled. We've set ourselves quite an ambitious target, therefore, to raise £60,000 through that week-long campaign. That will help us help a further 5,000 people in 10 villages across Nepal to gain access to safe water using clean energy. And to hit that target, we will need to receive online donations totaling 30,000 during that 7-day challenge week window. That, I think, as we've said, will allow us to unlock the full 30,000 pot of match funding that's available to us from the Reed Foundation and that individual supporter we mentioned. So when and where can you and others make a donation? Well, it's a strictly time-bound campaign running from midday on the 29th of November until midday on the 6th of December. During that period, any donations made to our campaign on the Big Give website will be doubled, so up to that total of 60,000 that we're targeting. Donations must be made via the Big Give website to qualify for the match funding. So you would need to have the ability to make your donation via credit or debit card, Apple Pay or Google Pay. Helen, if you're able to move on to the next slide, that'd be wonderful, please.
I have. Has it not moved?
Oh, I'm not seeing it on my screen. Okay, there we go. That's the one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, a bit of delay.
Maybe it's just probably just my end that's slow. So yes, so our ask to you today is to consider whether or not you're able to pledge your support to our campaign, our Water for Life campaign today. We have a pledge form. It's online at the Renewable World website, and I'll pop the link for that pledge form into the chat in this meeting in a second. And that pledge form enables you to tell us whether or not you feel able to support Renewable World's solar water lifting programming in Nepal, and if so, how much you plan to give during that 7-day window. We would then be in touch with you when the donations window opens at midday on the 29th of November. I will pop that link in the chat in a moment, but Helen, if you could move on to the next slide, that would be wonderful. Great. And of course, you know, support to the campaign comes in multiple forms. Financial, yes, but of course you can also help us to reach an even greater audience of potential donors by sharing information about our campaign within your own networks. That might be with friends and family, of course, colleagues, clients. Tell them why you support Renewable World and why they should too this December. We know that we're operating in challenging times, and many people are finding their day-to-day finances squeezed again and again. So if you aren't able to contribute financially this year, you can still support us in this way and just circulate that information about our appeal and our work and share it and amplify our reach. So I think, yes, there we go. Wonderful. So that's just a little information about the Water for Life appeal and the Big Give campaign and the giving mechanism within it. We'd like to move on now to the Q&A section of the session, during which I will, like I say, put that pledge form link into the chat. This is your opportunity. So has what you've heard and learnt about our solar water lifting systems in Nepal raised any questions, any thoughts for you as you've been listening to Helen and Taka introduce the work? Like I said at the top end of the call, you can easily use your reactions button and raise your hand within the meeting, and I will come to you and you can ask your question directly of our presenters, or indeed drop your questions and thoughts into the chat bar, and I can obviously read those back to our presenters, and we'll see what we can do about addressing those questions. While you're thinking on whether or not there are any questions for our panel, one thing, or a couple of things actually, that were raised for me, Helen and Taka. The first, I guess, is I wonder whether you could tell us a little bit more about how we ensure the longevity, the sustainability of the systems themselves.
Taka, would you like to take that one, or shall I?
Yes.
Oh, you're still on mute.
Yeah, I saw there is already a question typed. So yeah, I mean, Matt, I think the sustainability, it has multiple facets, and this is one critical area where we have been focusing. It starts right from the planning stage, where we engage communities and governments. We use this mixed funding model, which I mentioned. We see our role as a catalyst and provide project grant to the contributions from community and government. community, leads the procurement of goods, with technical support from the project team. Project facilitates, to develop water tariff system, and we are also making sure that users are able to pay water tariff, with increased income resulting from, water and production of vegetables. The water user committee, which is formed, is trained on account keeping and good governance. And there is paid, caretaker, provisioned in each supported community. And this caretaker also gets training on operation and maintenance, and in addition to this, there is this post-installation service agreement signed by the technology supplier, water users committee, and the local government, defining their roles at the post-construction stage. So, and in addition to that, actually, in all our SolarMOOS projects, as I mentioned before, we provide this technical support, for the protection and conservation of the water source from where water is being lifted. So, there are more facets there, more factors are there, but these are some of the areas, where we have been focusing, so far.
Wonderful, thank you, Taka. And Gillian has typed a question in the chat bar. Thank you, Gillian. So she says, are there plentiful sources of water and will they dry up in the future?
We can share this one, Taka. So the answer is sort of yes and no. Yes, there are plentiful water sources, though not all of them are ones that we can use to support communities. So one thing to start off with is when we're selecting a community to work with, we have to do a full feasibility study. We assess the water so this particular technology will solve their problems, and we do this full technical sort of feasibility study before we launch into installing technology like the SolarMOOS. So there are some communities for whom this isn't the right solution. Either the water source is too far away, or the water source isn't plentiful enough, or we see a challenge down the line if we were to tap that water source. And then, as Taka was just mentioned, in order to try and ensure the sustainability of the water source itself, we do conservation activities around the water source. We carry out a hydrological study of the water source, and then we carry out conservation activities. And this could be planting trees, it could be shoring up the land around, and it could be looking beyond just the immediate location to further around to see what other activities can be put in place. And a lot of it is around sort of tree planting and etc. to try and ensure the sustainability of that source.
Yeah, and also in addition to what Helen mentioned, many local governments now, they have developed this water use master plan, for their municipality, and in that master plan, the sources are identified, like which source is, appropriate for which community, so we also, follow that master plan, if it is available.
Wonderful, thank you both. Now, we've got a couple of hands raised. We're going to go to Richard first, and then on to Christian, please.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you, Taka and Helen, for an excellent set of presentations. I should declare an interest. I'm a trustee of Renewable World, have been for a year, and I'm delighted to be associated. These systems should be everywhere across the entire country. Why are there only 35? And that brings me to a question about the next phase of the project, and rightly you're thinking about developing it into having a market-based approach and trying to expand scale and sustainability that way. But it also strikes me, as you've set out, that there are enormous challenges in a country like Nepal for doing that in these kind of remote and sparsely populated areas. I just wondered how quickly you might move away from your current approach and what it might look like. And are there realistically private sector providers for this equipment in the near term? Thank you. But thank you so much for all the work that you have done and will be doing.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. Taka, would you be able to address, maybe starting with the presence of private sector providers in the pool that we might be looking at?
Yeah, thank you, Richard, for that really, striking question. I mean, we are actually, trying to move. We have now, in our team, we have trained our team members for this, market system, development approach, and it's not easy, but it's also, it's also that, we should be able to, do this, because this is something, that has been proven to be working, in similar context, and in some of our recent activities and projects, we have started, this conducting market assessment and trying some of the, the approach and elements, and it seems to be working, but there is a lot to do, before we can, fully, move on to this approach. But definitely we are heading towards that, Richard.
Helen, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think in terms of sort of the forward-going approach, Taka's covered that. I mean, in terms of why aren't there more than 35? Well, we're small and it all costs money. But we are at the point where we're managing to, leverage the local funding, which means the capital cost itself has the capital cost in terms of the grant funding has come down. But the work that we do around the project, to the agricultural training, the livelihood trainings, supporting the communities to have the capacity to really sustain the systems, that all is what still costs and what your funds would support through this campaign as well. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my first introduction to Renewable World about 5 years ago now was actually through our solar water lifting work in the pool, and the organisation I was working for at the time was looking at partnering with Renewable World on this, and it really struck us that, you talk about like why there aren't more systems. Yes, they are. Solar water lifting water up to communities living above their nearest safe water source is more expensive than the kind of what we might sort of see as the kind of classic resolution to water service issues in rural communities, which is to use gravity to pipe water down to communities. And it really, ever since sort of the earthquakes, all the way the earthquakes that struck Gorkha and other regions in Nepal back in 2015, the rebuild of services, of basic services into those rural communities. And indeed, there are plenty of rural communities, as I understand it, where those services didn't exist pre-earthquakes as well, often focused on those cheaper gravity-fed systems. And so those communities living below their source were the communities that benefited chiefly from the government and indeed the INGO sector's efforts to bring that water in, essentially exacerbating the marginalisation of the communities that were living above their nearest clean and safe water source that needed a solution like solar water lifting. It felt, this kind of work really can address true marginalisation in those rural areas in Nepal, and I think that was something that really struck me. And yes, cost is it's an example of where cost has been an issue in the past for the sector, for donors, for the government to bring this kind of technology to bear for the communities living above their source. But you can see from the presentations we've had today, for instance, and what we've learned through implementing it, how beneficial it can be as an approach. Thank you, Richard. So Christian, would you like to ask your question next, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for this presentation, and it's amazing how this program has progressed. I used to be myself a trustee of Renewable World 10 years ago when the program started, and it has been a very good achievement since it started. With regards to my question, it's I'm afraid it will be very similar to Richard's one and other question. It's really to I would like to figure out at which point in time this deployment can be achieved without any public support or charity support, and then widely deployed in the country or elsewhere.
Yeah, Taco, would you like to take Christian's question on, please? Thank you.
May I please request Christian to please, repeat your question? Sorry.
No, my question is I would like to understand whether it's possible and when this program or this system can be deployed in the country without public money or charity money on the self-supported scheme, I would say.
Thanks, sir. Yeah, I mean, it's there is also government-owned plans, that's ongoing, and trying to, cover, all the population, but the government funds are really limited. That is what I know, they make plans, but implementing plans have been always, difficult to achieve. This has, there are many schemes, where government starts, but then abandons, even sometimes because there is lack of funds. And it's still a long way to go, actually, in my opinion, Christian. Before that communities and the government themselves, are able to, cover all the population.
Matt, could I jump in? Sorry, it's Chris Morgan. I'm actually the chair of trustees, so declare my interest. I just wanted to give maybe a partial answer to that from my perspective. When we were talking about developing market systems, that might be about bringing in some kind of commercial money into building the systems, but maybe it's more in the first phase about building up the market, so the route to market. For the communities who are growing vegetables, so creating increasing the number of people involved in the market, giving access to the market. Those are the things that helps to provide the circumstances in which these sort of systems can then their value can then be more clearly seen, if you like, to a wider range of people. So I guess we're starting at that point. And I suppose my other thought on that is, in a little way, that this is basic infrastructure. So maybe it's a little unreasonable to expect these communities to find a way to fund their basic infrastructure without some support. So I think there's an ongoing role for Renewable World and other organisations like ours, but increasingly looking to mobilise the government support that's there and the other maybe market support. So we're becoming a kind of a stimulator of the market as much as a provider of the projects.
That's right. Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Christian, for your question. I'm conscious of time, and I want to get through the next couple of questions if we can before we hit 9:30. So, Ram Krishna, you were next. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Ram from Leeds. Thank you for great presentation and wonderful work which has been done in Nepal. So I have seen the systems like this present in many parts of the world, but those basically typically work on electricity or non-renewable energy sources. So what is the typical return on investment period if we want to switch from electricity powered pumps to the solar powered pumps?
Thank you, Krishna.
Yeah.
Thank you. Taka and Helen, did you catch that? What's the typical return on investment when you switch from electricity to non-renewable power to renewable?
I think I'll have to defer to Taco on that one, I'm afraid, if you have that technical information, Taco.
Please go ahead, Helen.
No, I have to defer to you. I don't have that information.
No, I mean, yeah, that's a bit technical question. Usually what we do is we compare, the solar water pumping with these, diesel pumps, and over the lifespan of this water pumping, which is around 20-25 years, if it is properly maintained, like in the initial capital cost of this solar water pumping is definitely, more than the diesel pumps, but over the period, the operation cost, maintenance cost, and all those, makes that, the diesel pumps are about 2 to 4 times higher. And regarding, you know, comparing with this these pumps, you know, that pumps run by electricity, actually where there is electricity available, because it's in Nepal, it's generated from hydropower. You know, usually if there is electricity, then we you know, like the community, also the government, you know, they also, you know, try to, you know, promote this pumping, you know, through electricity. So we are trying. So we often, you know, go to, or we actually go to the communities, you know, where there is no electricity. And sometimes what happens is that, especially if it is only irrigation, although there is electricity in the village, there is no electricity in the farm, you know, so the connection has not reached there. So in that case also, you know, the solar water pumping becomes economically feasible, rather than, you know, extending the electric, you know, transmission line. So that's the yeah, I would say that much, Ram. You know, I'm not sure if I have, you know, answered your question.
Yeah, that's okay. So maybe if you have that information in future, maybe, so if you can share with us, that would be great. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Thakur. And a final question, please, from Adam.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks very much for a great presentation. And it's great to see Renewable World going from strength to strength. My question sort of followed on from Chris's, actually, about sustainability, because we've been sort of tiptoeing around it or moving around it. And I wanted to hear just a bit more, if you will, about what looks like and what in-country sources of funds actually look like. I mean, does this represent a real source, or just a nod to the importance of government engagement, but actually not very much money?
Mm-hmm.
And I should say that I'm from the Austin Bailey Foundation, and pleased to be here as a guest.
Sorry, the question dropped out just midway for me, so I didn't catch it all.
It's a question about the truth about in-country funds and government sources. How does that actually work? Do they actually pay anything? What does it look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe I can start, Helen.
Sure, of course.
Thank you, Adam. This is a very important question. I mean, so far, you know, with Renewable World projects, there has been about 50% contribution, you know, financial contribution from the government side. Mm-hmm. There is about 20 to 25%, you know, contribution in terms of cash and kind from the community. And Renewable World is actually mainly, you know, providing grants for this electromechanical, you know, mm-hmm. component. Mm-hmm. So this is in the case of this, you know, solar water pumping system, whereas in agricultural activities or other, you know, awareness activities, you know, hygiene activities, in such activities, it's the funding is mainly, you know, going from the project. Mm-hmm. So it's actually, I'm amazingly surprised, you know, like when I joined Renewable World, you know, how much funds Renewable World is able to generate, you know, from the government and communities, and even Nepalese communities, or, you know, even some government people, you know, they don't believe, you know, in the beginning, you know, and when we provide them, you know, evidence and how we have done this, you know, this is really it's time taking. It's very much time taking, Adam, but it's really going well, you know, in terms of contribution from the government and community. Please, Helen, if you want to add something.
Yeah, just to add to that. So what we're specifically referring to is the actual sort of technical system. So the civil infrastructure work, the tanks, the water holding tanks, the water distribution pipelines, the tap stands, etc., and the solar pumping component with the pump itself, the solar panels. So that particular system is where we really focus on leveraging the match funds or kind of in-country funds. And as Taco said, we seek to leverage about 50% from the local governments. Looking at local governments, provincial governments, they will have budgets within their portfolios for water projects, for sanitation projects, for other schemes that, you know, have been allocated, and we lobby them to support these, to say, look, you know, we're bringing in this match funding, this will help a remote community, so put your funding, join us and bring your funding to this project. So yeah, about 50% of that whole scheme will come from the governments. Communities themselves also contribute, and we find that that is incredibly important to get that community buy-in. So they're not just getting, you know, something that's given to them by the government and by an NGO. They themselves, putting their hands in their pockets, they pay primarily for things like the distribution line and the tap stands themselves. It'll be a couple of thousand rupees each per household, and in some cases the communities themselves will actually put their hands to work and you know, put build those particular components. And then we target our grant funding very much for that, the renewable energy component, so the electromechanical. So that's how we spread it. And this, as Taco says, it's time consuming. It has meant that some of our projects have taken longer to deliver because of that need to lobby at local government level. We've seen that changes in local governments can then disrupt plans, you know, commitments can get withdrawn and we have to start again. But without that, it's just a grant funded project, and we can't ensure that there is that buy-in both from the communities and from the local government to sustain the projects.
And one point that,
sorry, Taka, I think we're going to need to wrap up actually now. I'm so sorry because we're a few minutes over. I'm conscious of everyone's time. So Taka, Helen, thank you for addressing Adam's question. Adam, I hope that helped. What I have done for everyone actually is in the chat bar you'll see both mine and my colleague Emily's email addresses. If you have any other questions around our solar water lifting programming in Nepal, broader programming, and of course around the Big Give and Water for Life appeal, drop us a note and we'll get back to you. You'll see above those couple email addresses in the chat bar that I've also linked to the Pledge Your Support form on the Renewable World website. So as I said, you know, support can come in many forms. So, you know, if you have heard something here today which has inspired you to get a bit more involved in Renewable World's work, and indeed this appeal, fantastic. Go online, read a bit more, and you can be in touch with us about this specific appeal through that pledge form. We're a few minutes over. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to hear from us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us, and we're going to wrap up now. So we'll be signing off, and yeah, hope to hear from you soon. Take care. Have a lovely day.